very expertise squad in the water police and the rescue squad, and there's nobody being lost to the system. They're all just going together. So the amalgamation, I think, will go together very smoothly and very quickly.
St Albans Without got its name when it was split from the Smith family St Albans stud nearby, and the present owner Norman Smith had to build his own homestead. That luxurious homestead was built and then extended during the 1960s, and around it the 1,000 hectares or so of prime land were developed to graze fat cattle and produce thoroughbred horses. The broodmare from the St Albans Without stud sold this year for $240,000. But now Norman Smith and his wife have decided to quit the Scone area to retire in England, where other family members live. The party of the property came as an option just at Luke's Church Hall in Scone, where the curious considerably outnumbered serious bidders. In fact, even before the auction started, locals had tipped who would be the ultimate purchaser. A short, swift exchange of bids, the $3 million mark was reached.
$3 million $3 million up. $3 million won.
$3 million was below the reserve, but a quick family conference showed that a compromise could be reached. With one more bid, John Walden was the new owner for $3,050,000. Walden, an oil company executive formerly stationed in Bahrain, would make no comment on his intentions for the property, describing it as a family property. Smith said he was happy enough to try to
Newcastle Communication Credit Union today from the small village in Germany in 1860 where the idea began. To feed and clothe their families during a time of famine, the farmers who had been forced into borrowing money from unscrupulous moneylenders banded together to help each other. In memory of those beginnings, staff today wore German costumes of that era and served customers with selections of German beer, wine and cheese. It was obvious that quite a few of the credit union's customers were taking advantage of the celebration while listening to traditional German music. Since 1948, Credit Union Day has been celebrated on the third Thursday in October. However, in America, it's celebrated as a national holiday.
There was this obvious reminder that had that situation prevailed, there would have been death and injury, and that's all.
It would be folly for us to embark upon a program worth $36 million to build a high-level bridge. We would be wasting $25 million, which can be much better spent on meeting our commitment to the National Highway Strategy and improving conditions for all of the motorists. Environmentally, and in terms of the support of the overwhelming interest of local people, a low-level bridge is the best solution.
When will construction of that second bridge start?
As soon as I can possibly get that construction started. But this campaign to try and achieve a high-level bridge is unrealistic and is doing nothing to help local interests.
While in the area, Mr. Brereton, like previous ministers, inspected roads with bad accidents, like the Torres. The stalemate over the Maritime Services Board workshop at Carrington, stalled by green bands. Mr. Brereton said he had instructed the NSB to initiate new discussions with all concerned with the project.
the fifth year the Cooter Lions Eden Surf Classic has been held, and this year's field, which includes surfers from throughout the Newcastle surfing zone, promises to make this a top-class competition. The tournament was scheduled to be held at Dixon Park, but the organisers decided the morning swell of around 2 metres made the conditions too tough and moved the event to Nobby. Local surfer Simon Law, who ran fourth in the world titles earlier this year, and Terry McKenna, who's just returned after a crack at the professional circuit, are favoured to take out the event. But after a strong showing in this morning's heat, Coffs Harbour's Steve Hart is expected to push those two in the finals. Last year's classic was taken up by Glenn Winton from the Central Coast. He's now ranked number 16 on the world's pro circuit. The heat will continue tomorrow morning at Dixon Park, with the finals being held tomorrow afternoon.
The attack on the reserve is the second since August, when 28 birds were released from an aviary in similar circumstances. Last night, 3 aviaries housing corellas, galahs and sulphur-crested cockatoos were broken into. Reserve Ranger Mr Ray Raisbeck believes animal liberationists are responsible. However, he said after the August attack, several birds were found dead because they were too old and tame to survive in the wild. He says he also fears for the safety of the birds released last night. What will happen to the birds?
Well, some of them would be assimilated into the surrounding birds. They'd cope quite well. Others, of course, would be taken by hawks. But a big percentage of the good talkers, for example, would end up in a worse situation than what he tried to create for them, because they would be trapped by people who would probably lock them up in small cages in backyards.
Organised by the Royal Newcastle Aero Club, the week was a salute to aviation pioneer Lawrence Hargrave, and saw almost every kind of aircraft at their event, from parachuting to kick specials, which gave their usual spectacular aerobatic display. Highlights of yesterday's show included a display by the RAAF Roulette Aerobatics team. And the Lockheed Silver fly past. The big draw card for yesterday's 24,000 visitors, however, was the final race of the Great Tiger Moth Air Race. The 27 competitors flew from Kansas City and then Maitland by Newcastle. Like Aviation Week, the air race brought back the true romance of flying.
State Treasurer Ken Booth opened today's seminar, which set out to look at the serious business of advising people how to make the most of their money. Organised by the Newcastle Chamber of Commerce and Industry and the Professional Investment Training Company, the seminar continues this evening. At present, it's not difficult to set up as an investment advisor, and title legislation is being sought by professionals in the industry.
The legislation which exists at the moment has to be tightened up. The Australian Investment Planners Association, of which I'm chairman, has made submissions to the government through the National Companies and Securities Commission, requesting that certain licensing changes be made, certain important educational requirements be met, certain basic training be underway, and we see that minimum times of partaking in the industry, we see that important as well.
Hello viewers, this is Information Technology Month at the City Hall. I
with information that another kind, a Dalek-style robot, was welcoming visitors to a separate function in the City Hall. As part of National Information Technology Month, a small exhibition in the supper room of the City Hall is demonstrating the advancing role of technology in the information industry. The exhibition, which will continue until Saturday, is officially opened by the member for Newcastle, Alan Morris, who said it was vital that industry and government develop policies which ensure we become the beneficiaries of new technology and not its victims.
Although the Sports Centre and the League have yet to sign on the dotted line, the Oval and the Grandstand effectively came under the control of the League yesterday. Big changes are planned, with the Sports Centre Trust applying for $2.14 million in bicentennial funds to make the Oval square, floodlight the grounds and make other improvements. According to Mr. Glenn Maloney, who began as Secretary-Manager yesterday, 3 multinational companies are interested in sponsorship deals, and with their help the Sports Centre may undergo dramatic changes. We may also see more sports played on the ground.
The area is here to be used not only for rugby league, but any of the codes that need a comparable ground. This is available for, say, rugby union, soccer, whatever, you name it, it's available.
And it's here to make money. How are you going to do that?
Well, we have quite a few things in the pipeline. We have some entrepreneurs interested in bringing overseas big acts here, you see, that it's very capable ground to hold big crowds. That will help. We also have in the early part of 1985, we have 3 big games on, which will include the Sydney clubs, which we ensure can bring large crowds to this area. One age in the paper recently implied that probably we could hold the Commonwealth Games here. Well, I agree with that, but I feel that the Commonwealth Games will only be a prelude or a trial run up to the Olympic Games. That's what I feel about Newcastle and this area.
The meeting last night highlighted the Newcastle importance of the Newcastle Civic Association. The area's residents group hope to use the association as a voice for review, now that they can no longer deal direct with council. The meeting debated a report on the sacking of the council written by Mr. Eric Jackson, who for 20 years was the Deputy Town Clerk of Manchester, England. He said the sacking was unnecessary and that a public inquiry into the council's operations would have been sufficient. He said there was nothing wrong with the council, that the recommendations of the 1979 Mains report on council procedure would not be cured.
Council had this before them about 5 years ago, and while it's the Bible for running a local authority in England, it received very little attention out here. Now, the authorities in England are very, very professional, and one would have hoped this council might have adopted similar procedures and become a little more professional than it's been in the past.
So who do you believe was to blame for the breakdown in the operating procedures of the council?
Well, I think you can blame the aldermen, you can blame their lack of attention to standing orders, you can blame the system in that it didn't give them a sufficient management structure to operate efficiently under.
primary underlying difficulty that the specialist surgeons face is that they have been locked into providing free services to Medicare patients in hospital without their consult and without negotiation. And in the words of one of my colleagues today, this is forcing the doctors to give charitable treatment to the patients. They say that it is not the government's right to demand charity, it is the doctor's right to treat patients on an honorary basis if they choose to do so. And they are very indignant about the fact the government has decided that there will be no allowance for the increased amount of honorary work that they are providing for their patients.
Meetings between executives of the local hospitals and the health department were held yesterday to discuss contingency plans if the doctors carry out their threat to resign. The Deputy Regional Director of Health, Mr. Ken Miller, refused to detail the plans, but he said the situation is well in hand. At the moment, only some non-urgent surgery is being cancelled.
At this stage, there has been some elective surgery cancelled, but the doctors have indicated that they will continue to maintain emergency services.
So there's no problem. If you do need a doctor, he'll be there?
Well, we hope so. Some have, of course, resigned completely, but at this stage, the general policy that they've indicated to us is that they will be willing to provide emergency services.
Children are all aged between 5 and 12. They come from schools in the East Lakes area, from Charlestown to Swansea, including a group from the Lakeside Special School for Handicapped Children at Warners Bay. They'll feature in tomorrow's programme. The presentation of musical acts from each school is the culmination of weeks of practice. Some choirs have been together rehearsing all year, but it seems that no matter how much practice goes into it, something always goes wrong. For this young man, it was all over before he was quite ready. At every session, an audience of 900 fellow pupils, mums and dads, is on hand to lend encouragement. And a special feature of this concert is that the audience can join in. In fact, participation by everyone seems to be the key to the festival's success, now in its 14th year. Chet Herrett, the principal of Charlestown East Primary, says there are many benefits.
But it does give boys and girls the opportunity to see what is happening in other schools. Part of the problem in schools is you don't see what's happening in other places, whereas in this sort of a festival it is possible just to see what's happening without feeling they've got to compete or they've got to win or anything.
Newcastle College of Advanced Education is the first in the state to introduce its own uniforms for student nurses. The decision was made because of the state government's announcement that all basic nurse education training is to be transferred from hospitals to colleges. In keeping with the new training approach, the college decided on uniforms for men and women that break away from traditional designs but still offer comfort and practicality. Nurse lecturing staff, in conjunction with the uniform place at Hamilton, also designed the uniforms with a view to students being identified with the college.
Usually associated with campaigning, Mr. Howard was all smiles as he greeted his party's candidate, the seat hunter, Dr. Ron Dalton. I questioned Mr. Howard on the difficulty of maintaining party morale in large hunter, given the continuing inverted comments on liberal leadership.
I think it's getting easier every day because the campaign has really gone beyond our wildest expectations. I think the last 10 days the government's been on the defensive, particularly on tax virtually every day. Yesterday we had a bulletin poll showing that the Labor Party support had dropped 5% and ours had gone up 3%. I find at a grassroots level all around the country that people are coming out more readily and more enthusiastically than they did in March 1983. So I think this is going to be a very fascinating campaign. I think Mr. Hawke may well regret having decided to run such a long campaign. He's got a lot more to lose in it than we do.